Most men do not know how to do this. Even guys who have studied game for years struggle in this situation. You've met a new girl who you like. How do you quickly, reliably get her attracted to you? How do you get her attracted to you at all? The most intuitive, instinctive things simply don't work. Sharing your resume with her is likely to bore her and make it seem like you're trying too hard. Showering her with compliments or showing interest in her is likely to put her off, or at the very least, put her on a pedestal and let her know she can have you. And what about just sitting back, being attractive and hoping she notices? Well, in that case, you're hoping. And it also takes way too long in a chaotic environment. So how can you reliably get attraction? In this video, I'm gonna show you, and guess what? It's extremely simple. The process has only 2 steps in it. If you can count to 2, you can get attraction. I'm gonna show you how. Oh, and by the way, at the end of the video, I'm gonna give you an example of this in action. This is actually a pickup scene where this method is used almost in its purest form. So it's very easy to see what's going on. And here is what doesn't work. Spoiler, this is what 99.9% of guys do. Number 1, trying to impress the girl with your resume. If you do this, you probably are just boring her. Your resume is a logical construct. Attraction doesn't happen logically, it happens emotionally and then is sometimes justified logically. So logic is not the way to get to attraction. Also, in trying to show a girl your resume, you're likely to be tryhard. You're likely to be doing what we call qualifying yourself. If you're trying to impress her, that sets you up as the lower value person in the interaction. The one who's trying harder to impress the other is lower value. So ironically, trying to show her your resume likely will make you look lower value, not higher value. Now, if your positive resume items came to light by accident or without you appearing to try hard, that would kind of work. But trying to show the girl your resume flat out does not. Method that doesn't work, number 2, complimenting the girl, or what we used to call showing intent, showing her that you are interested. Now, there is a place for this in game. If the girl already likes you or is attracted, it is necessary at some point to show that you're interested in a man-to-woman way, because otherwise she won't feel she has permission to act in a man-to-woman way with you. So this is a part of game. And in fact, one of the big sticking points a lot of guys have is beating around the bush and never getting man-to-woman. So there is some value in this. But the value does not come from it generating attraction. It comes from the fact that if she happens to be attracted to you already, this step will move the interaction forward. And it is necessary at some point to do this step. However, showing interest in her, complimenting her, what does it do? It puts her on a pedestal. It lets her know she's higher value than you in the interaction. It lets her know you want something from her. All of these are the opposite of creating attraction. So, being man to woman is necessary in the interaction at some point. Showing interest, though, does not increase your value, does not create attraction, it decreases your relative value to hers. What doesn't work? Method 3, simply being a high value guy and hoping she eventually realizes it. And this actually does kind of work in some contexts, but it has problems. If you were around a girl constantly, let's say you go to class together, you work together, you're in the same circle of friends, this actually would work quite well because there would be lots and lots of time for her to see your high value behaviors and get attracted to you over time. But this does not work on a short timeline. If you meet a girl at a bar or a club or a party or in the park randomly when you're only gonna see her one time, and you're hoping that she'll see all your high value behaviors just by accident, just because you somehow exude them, that's simply not reasonable. That's simply not going to happen. So this idea of just being high value and hoping she eventually realizes it can work eventually, but in the real world, in time compressed situations, it simply does not work very reliably. Not only would you have to be conveying a ton of high value things very, very quickly, but also she's in her own little world. She may not notice half of the things you even put out there. So does this method work? Yes, kind of in ideal circumstances, but in a practical sense, in the real world, first time you're meeting a girl, not really very well. So now that we've talked about what doesn't work, let's talk about what does work. And the great thing about this method is it's direct, it's repeatable, and it's easy. You do it on purpose, you can do it every time, and it's not complicated in any way. Step 1 of this method. When you're talking to a girl, I want you to assume a frame that, if true, would lead to sex. Now, that may sound complicated the way I said it, because I said it in a very particular way using very precise words, because I want you to get it right. Assume a frame. Assume something about the interaction as true, that if that thing were true, would cause an interaction that would end in sex. That's what you're trying to do. What are some examples of these things? What assumptions, what frames, if true, would lead to sex? Well, if you assume that she has a crush on you and she accepts that frame, that's likely to lead to sex. If you assume that she's your ex-girlfriend who you just randomly bumped into, Well, assuming you reconcile and don't hate each other, that's going to lead to sex, because that would be assuming a role where she's probably already had sex with you in the past in that hypothetical world. If you were to assume that you're way cooler and way more fun than her, and you're just going to show her a good night out of the kindness of your heart, that quite likely could lead to sex because she's seeing you as high value, following your lead throughout the night. If the frame was that you're interested in her, but not really sold, not really sure yet, and she got on board with that and tried to convince you to be fully interested in her, that, if true, could lead to sex. If you've ever heard the phrase, it's easier to beg forgiveness than to ask permission, that's kind of what you're doing here. You're not trying to ask permission to act like she likes you. You're not trying to persuade her to like you. You're just going in acting as though she likes you and living in that reality. And that presents her with a very interesting choice. She can either go along with that reality, which is great because you took a frame that, if true, would lead to sex, and she said, I'll go with that being true. Therefore, it will lead to sex by definition. But what if she opposes the frame? What if she goes against the frame? Well, that's obviously less ideal than if she accepts the frame, but it's still a good thing, because if she opposes the frame, that's going to create drama, tension, shit tests. And those are wonderful, wonderful things early on in an interaction because it gives you the opportunity to pass them. If a girl tests you and you pass that test, that is a huge demonstration of value, and value creates attraction. So when she puts you on the spot, when she challenges you, most men would crumble in that circumstance. If you don't crumble, you are a man of high value. If you're able to come back with a witty response, that's high value. If you're able to be non-reactive, that's high value. If you're able to act like she's silly and ridiculous and this is all amusing for you, that's high value. Passing shit tests is one of the fastest ways to generate value in game. So let's look at this method in full. You'll go in and you assume an imposing, kind of arrogant frame that, if true, would lead to sex. Well, that's definitely gonna get her attention through the arrogance and through the fact that it's unusual, it stands out, etc. If she accepts that frame, you're golden. If she doesn't accept that frame, well, now you're getting into banter, you're getting into frame control, you're getting into shit tests, and that gives you a unique opportunity to demonstrate your high value characteristics instantly. Either way, heads you win, tails you win. Both outcomes, accepting your frame or giving you shit tests, are far better than a flat interaction. They're far better than wherever you were before assuming this frame. Two quick caveats to this. Number one, the frame you assume should not be insulting or demeaning. If it is too far away from her reality or too far away from what she accepts about herself in the world, she's gonna resist it very, very strongly. So for example, assuming that she's your ex-girlfriend, assuming she has a crush on you are great ways to utilize this frame. Assuming she's a dirty fucking whore, has no value and is beneath you, while that is a frame that would lead to sex if true, it's a frame she's simply just not going to accept. It's a frame that is so far divorced from her reality, it's so demeaning, so degrading, so much of a emotional jolt in the negative direction, it's probably simply not gonna fly. Now, could it occasionally with a really low self-esteem girl? Possibly, but it's just not a good choice. It's a very bad application of this idea. Second point, in assuming the frame, you have to act the frame, not state the frame. So if you're gonna take the frame that the girl is your ex-girlfriend, you don't walk up and be like, hi, excuse me, you're my ex-girlfriend, and we're gonna act like that's true in this conversation. No, you don't do that. You go up and you act the way you would if she actually were your ex-girlfriend. Like, oh my God, this is so random. What are you doing here? You're literally the last person I expected to see here, right? You start acting as though the frame is true. You don't state the frame. Or if your frame is that the girl has a crush on you, you don't be like, oh my God, you're that girl that had a crush on me. No, you just say some sort of slightly arrogant things. You sort of just assume that she's the one hitting on you throughout the interaction. You don't flat out state the frame. You just assume the frame and let it come through. Final point before we get to the example of this method in action. If you don't know how to pass shit tests, there are lots and lots of videos on my channel on how to pass shit tests. Just know this, generating shit tests is a good thing if you know how to pass them. If you don't know how to pass them, yeah, shit tests might be a problem. But learn how to pass them. It's an incredibly valuable skill and it's not actually that complicated. Again, lots of references, lots of sources on my channel. So now let's look at an example of this method in practice. And this method is from a fictional scenario. It is from a movie scene. However, this is the cleanest, clearest, most direct example of this method that I have ever seen in reality or in cinema. So it's a very, very clear and good example. Also, I'm a firm believer that for a movie scene to be written convincingly, it has to have a kernel of truth. So I will say, as someone who's done game for 20 years, the game in this scene is pretty damn close to something that would work in the real world. So let's look at it and see what we can learn from it.
Hi. What's your name?
Samantha.
Hi, Samantha. I'm Nikki.
So here, we haven't really gotten to a fully assumptive frame from him yet, but what he did on his open is he asked for compliance. He asked for her name. He asked for her to reciprocate in some way. Typically, you might not even want to do this on an open because certain girls just won't reciprocate. You can see even in the scripted, movie, she actually hesitated to give the line, which is very legitimate. A lot of girls would hesitate to give a name here. A lot of girls might be just like, why do you want my name? That kind of thing. But he did ask for a lot of compliance. He did something that was a little bit pushy and presumptuous already. And she complied to it so far.
I'm leaving.
Really?
And that is a shit test / pseudo rejection.
Really? Why?
It's late.
You're right. We should get going.
And that is extremely assumptive. And this is actually a way of passing a shit test. One way to pass a shit test is what we call misinterpretation, misunderstanding it as a positive. He said, I'm leaving, it's late. He said, you're right, we should get going. Right? She meant, I'm leaving, I don't have time for this interaction. He misinterpreted it as, okay, yeah, you're right, we should get going. So he passed the shit test through misinterpretation. He passed the shit test through assuming a cocky frame, assuming a frame that if true would lead to sex, the frame that they are going home together.
So wait a second, you had dinner here? What'd you have?
Salad.
What kind of salad?
A Greek salad.
You had a Greek salad at a French restaurant. I like that. Oh.
And that's just a good, interesting game point. When you've done something particularly gamey, it's oftentimes a good idea to have a little bit of normal conversation before you do something else that's gamey. So he took this big risk, he passed the shit test, he did this very presumptuous thing, and then he did something that built a little bit of rapport. And what he actually did is a format I teach a lot of my boot camps. It's called question, answer, tease. Right? He asked the question, what'd she get for dinner? She answered, and then he teased about getting a Greek salad at a French restaurant. So question, answer, tease. But mainly what he just did was he stepped away from the game, built a little normal conversation, and then he can go back to something gamey afterwards.
Oh, ballet, huh? I bet you're a bad driver. You want me to drive?
So now he's right back to his assumptive frame. He pressure on with the assumptive frame, backed off with the whole bit about salad, and now he's back to, do you want me to drive? I bet you're a bad driver, right? So number one, it's a tease, right? But number two, again, he's back on this frame, this assumed frame that if true would lead to sex, that they are going home together.
Well, I'll flip you for it. Here. Heads, I drive. Tails, you drive. There it is.
It's tails. You flipped it.
Well, you always flip it. Don't be a sore loser.
And that's actually a really, really interesting technique in sales and in game called the alternate of choice close. It's like if a car salesman, instead of saying, do you want to buy a car, says, do you want the red one or the blue one? Right? He's saying, I'll flip it. Tails, I'm driving. Heads, you're driving. And if actually engaged with it, right, because he was being silly and doing it wrong or challenging in this way, she engaged with the flip. But implicitly, by caring which way the flip goes, there's sort of this subtle undertone that the going home part might be real.
Look, you're cute and everything, but you're not coming home with me.
And so that's another shit test, right? Another shit test pseudo rejection. You're cute and everything, but you're not going home with me.
Thank you.
Okay, you're gonna have to do better than that. You're cute and everything? What is that?
And so here he sort of passes the shit test by just treating it like it's silly and ridiculous. And he actually challenges it by making her justify it instead of making him justify it, right? This is another sales technique that's very, very useful. This is a technique I learned in Zig Ziglar's Secrets of Closing the Sale. What he says is when a prospect, someone you're trying to sell something to, gives an objection to you, you phrase the objection to them back as a question, right? So if they say, it's just too expensive, you go, it's too expensive? And now they have to justify why it's too expensive instead of you having to justify why it's worth the price. So when he says, you're gonna have to do better than that, you're cute and everything, he's putting the objection back to her for her to justify the objection instead of for him to solve the objection.
I was trying not to be rude.
You're far from rude.
Okay, now she's saying this, I was trying not to be rude, it's a platitude, right? She doesn't really mean it. She was trying to reject him, but she's saying a platitude. Now he's going to misinterpret again that her trying not to be rude was because she cares so much about what he thinks or because she actually thought she was being rude. And so now he's going to say, you're far from rude in a way that's almost as though he's like granting her amnesty or granting her pardon for her out of line action, as though he's the higher value one bestowing a favor on her. But the other thing he's doing here, if you look at the physicality, is he is actually changing his tone of voice. He's softening. They're getting more face-to-face. He's creating more of a moment of intimacy at the same time. So that's another good technique.
You're far from rude. I'll help you out. Tell me that you're married.
And so this is a nice little technique of you are actually kind of playing devil's advocate against yourself, but in an exaggerated way, right? So he's saying, oh, here are the things that I would accept as real excuses. And he's on the surface trying to give her a legitimate way out. But what he's actually doing is picking things that are probably not true, and he's creating a yes ladder, or in this case, kind of a no ladder. But he's creating a ladder of positive responses for him that make it more and more plausible that they could in fact go home together.
I am not married. That would be a lie.
Tell me that you're mad that you're in love with someone.
That would also be a lie.
And tell me why I can't come home with you.
I don't know you.
And that's just an example of reading her actions more than her words. She says, I don't know you, but she's laughing, she's looking in the eyes a particular way. And it would be very, very correct and appropriate in game to go ahead and kiss in this situation as occurs. So very, very good. But you'll notice throughout this entire scene, his frame is extremely assumptive, extremely cocky. His frame from the start is, we are gonna go home together. He assumes that frame that if true would lead to sex, and then she can either go along with it, or she can give the shit tests, which give this banter and make the interaction actually much more interesting and actually give it many more ways to become man to woman. So I hope that scene illustrated the point well for you, and I hope that this technique is very clear for you. Again, you're assuming something that if true would lead to sex, and you're making that a part of the interaction. If she takes that assumption and runs with it with you, you're in great shape. If she shit tests you, you're also in great shape. So like I said, this is about the simplest, most reliable way to generate attraction, to generate positive sexual tension that makes you look good and lets you put your best foot forward in a way that she'll notice. That's a very convoluted way of saying attraction, right? I recommend you do this in your interactions. And it doesn't have to be as blatant as, I'm going home with you, or you're my ex-girlfriend. Again, a lot of these frames can just be, I'm a high value guy and you're chasing me. Or you were checking me out and so I came over and talked to you. There are plenty of frames that are a little more subtle that still get the job done, but you want to assume a frame that if true would lead to sex. It's a lot harder to oust a frame that already exists in the set than it is to insert a frame into the set. So you want to go in with the frame you would like to be true already present if possible. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you can understand how this technique works and you're able to apply it in your own game. If you like this type of coaching where I'm telling you exactly what to say or exactly what frame to take on, you're gonna love my course Verbal Game, where I talk about exactly what to say and do in almost every single situation in game. You can check it out at the link below. See you there hopefully, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.